Carlo Acutis was just an ordinary 15-year-old boy, yet he became the very first saint of a completely new generation. Today, he rests in a crystal coffin dressed not in traditional robes but in jeans, sneakers, and a bright hoodie. Long lines of people, young men and women, elderly pilgrims, mothers holding their children, come to see him and pray. And to think, not too long ago, he was simply a regular student who loved playing video games, enjoyed programming, and quietly held a deep belief in God. But how exactly did this Italian teenager rise to sainthood? Why has his story become a beacon of hope for millions around the world? And what is the reason people call him the patron of the internet and God's messenger? Stay with us until the end of this video to discover the incredible life of Carlo Acutis. Let's begin. Carlo was born on May 3, 1991, in London, but soon after his birth, his family moved back to their homeland, Italy. His parents came from a well-off background and lived comfortably, but unlike their son, they were not particularly religious. From his earliest years, Carlo displayed something unique, an extraordinary sense of faith that seemed to come naturally to him. By the age of 7, he was so devoted that he insisted on receiving his first communion, a sacred moment for Catholics when one consciously chooses faith and experiences a special closeness to God. Normally, children are considered too young at that age, but Carlo's seriousness impressed the priest so deeply that he granted him special permission. From that day forward, Carlo made it a point to attend Mass every single morning. By the time Carlo turned 11, he was already guiding and teaching younger children about the fundamentals of Christianity. He explained to them the importance of prayers, spoke about God, and showed them how to live a Christian life. Yet his faith was never something he flaunted or turned into fanaticism, it was simply a natural part of who he was. Even his closest friends hardly realized how deeply religious he had become. Outside of church, Carlo enjoyed all the things any teenager would. He loved soccer, played countless hours of video games, hung out with friends, and took his dog for walks. At the same time, he was known for his kindness and generosity. Despite his young age, Carlo spent much of his pocket money buying sleeping bags for the homeless, many of whom he knew personally by name. He regularly volunteered at a soup kitchen in Milan, serving those in need, and in the evenings, he would bring hot meals and drinks to the poor living on the streets. On his way to school, he often stopped to listen to strangers' troubles and silently prayed for sinners. He especially stood up for children with disabilities who were bullied by others, not just defending them but becoming a genuine friend to them. Carlo carried a big heart and a vision of equality, always seeing the image of God in every person regardless of their background, faith, or social class. Perhaps his greatest passion, however, was computers. Fascinated by technology, Carlo taught himself programming and web design without formal training. What could have been just a hobby soon became a mission. He built websites for Catholic organizations, and he even taught elderly people how to use the internet. But his most ambitious project was something extraordinary. He dedicated years of his short life to documenting Eucharistic miracles, rare events that Catholics believe are signs of God's presence during the sacrament of communion. He gathered information about hundreds of such miracles from across the globe and built a website that is still considered one of the most comprehensive resources on the subject. Through this project, the young programmer proved that the internet could serve as a tool of goodness and faith, earning him the title of a God's influencer in the digital world. Carlo's life was like a brilliant flash, short, but so bright that it touched millions. At just 15 years old, tragedy struck when he was diagnosed with acute leukemia. The illness spread aggressively, leaving doctors with no hope for his recovery. Yet Carlo accepted the devastating news with incredible calmness and unwavering faith. He told his family, "I offer all my suffering to the Lord, for the Pope and for the Church, so that I may go straight to heaven." Instead of seeking pity, he comforted his parents and urged them not to weep for him. Soon after, Carlo slipped into a coma and passed away on October 12, 2006. Honoring his final wish, his family buried him in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, his lifelong role model. But Carlo's story did not end with his death. Almost immediately, people began sharing stories about him. Friends, teachers, and priests recounted their experiences, while online posts about his life started spreading. His mother, Antonia Salzano, though devastated by the loss, did not retreat into grief. Instead, she dedicated herself to continuing her son's mission. She began speaking at conferences, showcasing his website, and telling the world about how her son had lived with faith and love. Thanks to her, Carlo's story spread far beyond Italy, inspiring countless people around the globe. As more people learned about him, they began praying to Carlo, asking for guidance, strength, and miracles. His tomb in Assisi quickly became a place of pilgrimage. Visitors ranged from teenagers to the elderly, and from mothers with babies to entire families. Stories soon circulated about miraculous healings. One woman was reportedly cured of cancer, and another woman, previously declared infertile, unexpectedly conceived after praying to him. In 2013, at a prayer service in Brazil dedicated to Carlo, a remarkable event occurred. A 6-year-old boy named Mateus, who suffered from a serious pancreatic condition, attended the service. He prayed and touched a piece of Carlo's t-shirt, and just 3 days later, doctors confirmed his illness had completely disappeared. A special church commission later recognized this as an official miracle. 14 years after his death, Carlo was beatified. His remains were exhumed and placed inside a church for public veneration. What shocked the world was the discovery that his body was partially incorrupt. His face, though not perfectly preserved, still looked whole, almost as though he were only sleeping. Dressed in a hoodie and jeans, he was placed inside a crystal coffin for pilgrims to see. This image of a modern teenager saint became a powerful symbol for an entire generation. For Carlo to be officially canonized as a saint, more miracles were needed. And soon, reports of healings linked to him multiplied across the world. The first official miracle was Mateus's healing in Brazil. The second was the recovery of Valeria, a young woman from Costa Rica who had suffered a devastating head injury. Doctors had declared her case hopeless, but her mother prayed fervently to Carlo. Miraculously, Valeria came out of her coma and made a complete recovery. These two miracles became the decisive evidence the Church required to declare Carlo Acutis a saint. But this raises the question, who ultimately decided that this young boy was truly God's messenger? For believers, the answer is simple: it was God's will. However, critics argue differently, suggesting that the Vatican may have